It's time to get the story behind the story. Interviews with newsmakers, news breakers, and Vermonters making a difference. WCAX presents 802 News with Mark Johnson. Here's Mark.
The Vermont ski industry has undergone significant change in the past few years, lots of consolidation. Many of the big players, including Killington, Stowe, Mount Snow, and Okemo, have been taken over by large out-of-state companies. One of the independents left still standing is Bolton Valley, which is back in the hands of the Delorier family. Patriarch Ralph Delorier founded the family-friendly ski area in 1966 and owned it until financial pressures forced him to sell in 1997. In 2017, 20 years later, the family and a group of investors bought the resort back. In this edition of 802 News, sponsored in part by Red Hen Baking Company, we talk with Lindsay Delorier, Ralph's daughter, who serves as Bolton Valley's president. We discuss the challenges and benefits of being independent, how the resort plans to deal with climate change, their efforts to make the Chittenden County site a four-season attraction, as well as the recent controversial decision to replace the indoor skate park with tennis and pickleball courts. Welcome to Bolton Valley 2.0. What was it like growing up with this mountain as basically your backyard?
Obviously it was really fun and really special to have a ski area growing up. It was a little bit, there was kind of two sides to the coin as a kid, because whereas today, Bolton Valley Village is a really vibrant community and neighborhood with a lot of families and young kids. When we were growing up back here, it was not that way at all. There were very few year-round residents. Really just one other kid on the block, and she was my brother's age. In the winter, you might imagine it was so fun because all of my friends were up here, and my house was the place to be, just like my house is the place to be now for my daughter and her friends. But in the summer, and in the shoulder seasons especially, it was a little bit of a different story. Not as many people up here, though, to be fair, back then we had a really vibrant tennis program, and actually our summer business was pretty vibrant. There were a lot of second homeowners who would come up for summer vacation. So I had some friends who were recurring summer friends. I guess what I'm saying is it was amazing, but there was a lot of alone time also as a kid, which I think is good.
Tell me about the current situation, the backstory here on the ownership of your dad and the rest of your family. Your dad started this place, I guess, I didn't realize your grandfather was involved in this too.
He was involved. He was involved in the sense that the land belonged to him. So, and then he supported my father in the development of the ski area, but my father was really the sole developer and operator with, I would say, the backing and advice and support of my grandfather, who, as I understand it, would take a hard look at the financials and get on my dad's case.
Okay.
Oh, wait, that sounds so familiar.
How involved is your dad today? He's, in his late 80s at this point?
He's in his late 80s, and he remains very involved. It's hard to pin down exactly what he does, but he does a lot of everything, and he looks over everything, and my little joke earlier is really true. He has a great sense of the business, obviously, as you'd imagine, having run it himself for 30 plus years. And so he sees things. And one of his special gifts really is seeing things from the guest perspective. And so he looks with eyes that I don't necessarily look through, and he can provide that feedback and that guidance. Of course, we can't do everything we'd like to do all the time, so I can't always take his advice, but he has a lot of valuable insights, many of which really do help to guide the decisions that we make here. I'll joke with our board and friends that he usually, the way it goes is he comes in with this long typed up, list of issues, things that he sees, and we go through them, and it drives me crazy, and I'm so annoyed, and then he leaves, and then I look back at the list, and I'm like, darn it, oh, he's right, pretty much everything is always right, and I pretty much always have to go back and take his advice. So yeah, he's very involved in that way, and we wouldn't be where we are without him.
What have you learned from him?
What have I learned from my father?
Yeah, about running a business.
Well, one of the things I think that I learned from him very early on, just as a child, I don't know if this is about running a business, but I guess maybe it's about running a family business, running a business and having that integrated into your life in the way that this is, I think, so uniquely. I can remember when I was a kid and he was in this role, I never felt like he was inaccessible. I could go to his office door and open it to grab my skis or to ask him a question or to ask for more meal tickets, whatever I needed. And no matter what he was doing, no matter what meeting he was in, he would stop the meeting, give me a hug, introduce me around, and do whatever was needed. And I think a business like this, Bolton Valley, it's small. There's 1,000 ins and outs. I don't think anyone can really comprehend how much goes on up here to make this place operate unless you're really in the thick of it. It's an incredible amount of moving parts, always dynamic, always changing. And so it's totally consuming. To make this place work is totally consuming, day and night. And so I think I saw my father growing up totally consumed, but always also making time for family. But it's different. It's not you go to work and then you come home and you have family time. My radio is always on. I'm always listening. You might end up back outside, doing something, being called in. You never know. So it's very constant, but it's totally integrated into your life. And I think probably the most important thing I learned was that type of work ethic, but also how to create the opportunity to still have, those family connections and to prioritize those. It's not really a hard-hitting business answer, and I could talk more about spreadsheets and financials, which also I've learned a lot from my dad about spreadsheets and financials too. But I think overarching, how to balance this type of business where you live up here, you work up here. It's totally consuming, but you want to, I don't want my daughter to feel that I'm not around. So I'd say that's probably the most important thing because the nature of this business is unique in that way.
Anybody can learn spreadsheets. What you just answered there is really it's a really beautiful answer.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
What is it about running this business that you say it's all-consuming and that people don't really understand everything that's going on? Give me an example or two of something that you need to do that I would just never, in my wildest imagination, know or understand.
Well, I don't think it's that you can't imagine it. I think it's just the reality of the constant drumbeat nature of it. So this business is comprised of many businesses, and yet, under one or two roofs. We've got, the hotel operation, several food outlets, rental, retail, the sports center, the chairlifts, all the ski operation. In addition, we own the water company, so we run the water company and the sewer company. We don't just treat the water and sewer for the ski area, but for all the residential homes and condominiums up here.
Wow.
So that's an enormous thing. You've got stormwater you've got to think about. In those high rains, you might not think that because there's snow on the ground, the water bars aren't working anymore. And so, but then once the snow melts, then the water bars are going to burst and you could wash out your shop road. You got to think about that. You've got to think about, one thing that and then we have these crises in the middle of all of the day-to-day. You've got these lifts don't just run themselves, and they're old, They take constant maintenance. There's a lot of issues. We have a vehicle maintenance shop. You might not think about the number of snowmobiles that are on the hill or the groomers that we have or, the plow trucks, and things break constantly all the time. Just keeping just keeping the place running. You might not think about, showing up in the morning at 8 a.m. and realizing that the cafeteria didn't get cleaned last night. And, well, people are going to be here in half an hour. And, I've chatted with many a customer while I'm, wiping down the tables and picking French fries up off the floor from the night before, because who knows what happened if somebody didn't show up. The computer systems might go down and we can't make any sales. So then, everybody's jumping and trying to jury rig that. And we can't just do cash only in this day and age, but we can't just give away the product for free. So how do you solve that in that moment? And then you have full-blown crises. We have water leaks. The pipes are aging. We have aging infrastructure like every city. We're essentially a municipality, even though it's all private up here. We had the roof on our water reservoir building cave in under heavy snow load a few years ago. And that's drinking water for the resort and the whole community. There's a lot. Trail maintenance. You might not think about the branches growing in and narrowing the trails or growing over our night lights. I've barely scratched the surface.
I'm already up all night.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds. How do you separate your work? How do you actually sleep through the night with everything you just laid out?
I'm a pretty good sleeper most of the time, not always. It would not be truthful to say that I sleep through every night like a baby. But I think you get, like with anything, once you get used to it, you get a kind of thick skin. You learn how to live within whatever environment you're living in. And so you learn to sleep at night. I don't know. You learn to live in that. And, sure, I'm talking about all of those logistics, but I also, on the flip side of that, have this beautiful work reality where when things aren't hitting the fan and things are going good, I can slip out at 3 o'clock and throw my skis on and watch the sunset, get out and clear my mind, think about how to solve those problems or think about something else entirely, and walk home. I can keep my radio on in case anything comes up, but it's a blessed life. It's a blessed life. I walked into work from my house today. I don't put many miles on my car except when I need to go to town to go to the grocery store. My parents live down the street. We're such a small community here. My brother lives next door. It would be easy to start to take something like this for granted, but it's like people in the ski industry call the ski industry snow farming, and it's really true. It's like a farm, you just got to keep it going. It ebbs and it flows. We've got crazy times and calm times. And I love the dynamic nature of it. Everything that I mentioned to you, thinking about, the portion size of hamburgers to, the pipes in the ground for the water company or the storm water. Every day is different. And so it's very engaging. And it really stretches the mind, and you have to be so creative also because, it's no surprise to anyone, but we're not the most well-resourced maybe of all the ski areas in the state. So you have to be really creative. It's scrappy. There's a real team spirit, as funny as that may sound or as kitschy as it may sound, but there really is. And there's always a new and interesting, or maybe sometimes not so interesting, but there's always a new problem to solve. Some are more fun than others, certainly.
When the family took the business back, and I know it took a couple of years, how did you, of all your siblings, wind up basically in charge?
I think, the easiest way to kind of describe it is like I was the one who was able to in that moment. There was no competitive jostling or anything like that. We are, it's not Succession. It's actually much more mundane.
No mini series in the making here.
No interesting mini series. For us, if anything, and actually really tangibly, this place has really brought us even closer as a family. We've always been a close family, but now 4 out of 5 of us actually live up here on the mountain. I mean, myself and my brothers. One holdout still out in Jackson Hole, but we're trying. But when we bought it back, my dad and my younger brother really put the deal together. And when we started out, as you know, I was working in Montpelier, and so we bought the ski area with a group of investors, not just us. Bought the ski area and the water company. It was kind of a package deal. And the guy who was running the ski area for the previous owners stayed on as the general manager and president of the company. And the idea is that he'd do that for a while everybody kind of got their feet wet and got to know the place, et cetera. And I started out by just managing the water company, specifically because of the kind of regulatory nature of it. And it was actually in a crisis moment, and it really needed somebody to just give it full focus. And so I kept my day job in Montpelier and just managed the water company. But then halfway through the first winter, that general manager who I was talking about decided that, it was time for him to move on, new ownership, all that stuff. It totally makes sense. There was no animosity or anything like that. It was just what he decided to do. And so, at that point we had a kind of family meeting, and it was like, okay, well, what are we going to do here? Who's poised, who's in the position and willing to do it? And it was like, it's like you spun the arrow or whatever, and it just landed on me. And it did take a little bit of soul searching for sure, because I was really happy doing what I was doing, and I really did love working in Montpelier and working on public policy. It was something that I had come to and found, and was really inspired by, and I do miss it. But for all the soul searching, this is where we grew up. This was our business. This was our family. So I think I more went through the motions of soul searching, but always knew that the answer was clear.
Were you scared at all?
Of course, because we were undercapitalized, and there was a history of subsequent, maybe failures is too strong a word, but the place was not sustainable as a business, and there was no guarantee that it would become so. And we didn't have a lot of resources, and we had a relatively short runway to figure it out. So it was very stressful, very nerve-wracking, not a sure thing at all. So it did feel like a risk, giving up the relative security of, my previous profession.
How hard was it on the family? How hard was it for your dad for that 20-year gap?
Well, it was very sad for a while, as you might imagine. And there was a sense of kind of loss, I think, that was perpetual through that time period. And it was that connection to it, really, that made us say yes to coming back when Doug and Larry, the previous owners, reached out to us to ask if we would have the interest, really reached out to my dad. But you know how it is with loss. You move on. And we never thought that this was a possibility. Nobody was looking for the 2.0. Everybody had totally moved on. It didn't seem in the realm of possibility. And when it happened, it was so surreal. I mean, truly, it was so surreal in the truest sense. I wasn't sure if I was truly awake for a long time. It took probably a year, maybe even 2 years to settle into realizing, okay, I'm not in a coma. I mean, it was so truly unexpected.
Wow. Let's talk a little bit about how you're doing now. You mentioned you had a pretty short runway, had to get things back up financially. What's the state of the state right now here? The
state of the state is stable. We've done
breaking even. Is that what what does that mean?
Yes, we have a stable cash flow. We're in a great position. The reason why I'm having any hesitancy in my voice at all is because the summer was very challenging. We had a tough summer. That rain, we didn't flood up here, but the constant rain it rained. We couldn't string 2 sunny days together. And so in the world of outdoor recreation, weather matters. And in the summer, for us, we've one of the major investments that we've made is a new mountain bike park, lift operated. We've put a lot of resources into creating some really incredible trails for beginners, intermediates. We had the gnarliest advanced terrain ready-made, so that was easy enough. But we've made a lot of investments in that. And the rain took a real bite out of a year where we were expecting to see a lot of growth. And we had invested in not just the physical resources, but also the human resources to be prepared to absorb that growth. And so we are coming off of a tough summer, but even that tough summer is absorbable by us, which is great, and we're very grateful for it. So we're stable, we're growing. We've made a lot of capital investments over the last 5 years, and the purpose of those investments was to stabilize the business, and we've accomplished that. So it feels great. And now I think we have to kind of grow into our new shoes, and that's what we're doing, even while we're planning for the next phase of growth, which we are planning for, and there's a lot more to do.
More with Lindsay Deslauriers in a moment. At Red Hen Baking Company, they believe pure, uncomplicated ingredients in the hands of skilled artisans are the building blocks for great food. They're dedicated to creating the best food from the best ingredients. You'll find an ever-changing lineup of delicious pastries, sandwiches, and soups at their beautiful cafe off Route 2 in Middlesex, just off I-89. Their breads are also available in many other locations. Led by owners Randy George and Eliza Kane, Red Hen Baking Company has been on the leading edge of the local food movement since 1999. Back to our discussion with Bolton Valley President Lindsay Deslauriers. Educate me. Is really the revenue in the skiing? Is it in the hotel? Is it in something else I'm not thinking of? I just have no idea how this business operates.
No problem. We think about it in 3 sort of major departments. We've got the resort department, which is skiing as the main thing, but in the summertime, the mountain bike operation. We've got the sports center, the Nordic Center. We do a lot of interesting things around the backcountry. So anything that's the rental shop, anything that supports the outdoor recreation falls into sort of that resort category. And then we have the lodging, the hotel, and then food and beverage, all of the food and beverage outlets. And also under that umbrella is our wedding program in the summer, which one of the things that we've invested in over the past few years is the purchase of the Ponds building. So when we bought the ski area back, the Ponds building, which is a really beautiful, pretty high-end wedding venue, was not a part of that purchase. And that was actually operated for those first several years by the Inn at Essex. And we did finally buy that building back a couple of years ago, leased it back to the Inn at Essex while they finished out because weddings book well in advance, and took it over and operated our first summer of weddings last summer. So we're just getting our feet wet there. We had a great summer, great reviews, a lot of happy brides. Anyway, I'm digressing just because it's on our mind a lot lately, thinking about that program. That falls into food and beverage and catering also. So those are the 3 categories: resort, lodging, food and beverage.
You mentioned earlier how you're an independent operator. I mean, it's been just phenomenal what's happened here in Vermont. I guess maybe it's the trend nationwide. Stowe is not locally owned. Stratton, Killington, Okemo, I could probably go on and on. How difficult is it for you to operate as an independent, smaller operation?
Well, having never run one of the conglomerates, it's hard for me to make the comparison. But I think any small business owner can relate to our experience here of having to be very creative and very scrappy to make it work. We don't have deep pockets backing us up we have to be sustainable as a business. And that's a creative challenge. It's a part of the fun of it, really, part of the stress of it, but also part of the fun of it. I think that, a lot of people look at the big ski conglomerates and they think, oh, this must be bad for the smaller independents. That's not necessarily true. I actually think in some way that it creates a greater distinction between the resorts. And people like variety. People want choice. That's a part of what makes capitalism work, right? Is the freedom to choose, the freedom to be a consumer, to say, this is the experience I want and this is the experience I'll pay for versus this is the one I won't. And if you have everybody, and if everybody's independent and everybody's going through the same challenges, things are going to look somewhat similar. Distinction is good. There are a lot of people who want this experience, who want to feel connected to the local community, who want to see me and my dad and my brothers out, checking tickets in the lift line sometimes.
Cleaning up the French fries
Cleaning up the French fries, whatever. If there's people who don't mind the French fries on the floor because of the nature of the environment that you walk into. There are people who like the slower lifts because it means you have less crowded trails. There's an experience that's going to fit everyone, and I think that the distinction between the larger ski areas and the smaller independents is not necessarily a bad thing for anyone. There's room for us all here under the tent. And since these guys have been, going down this path with these mega passes, actually numbers in the ski industry nationally have grown. And, there's an argument to be made that it's in part because of those big mega passes. I hope and believe that people will continue to want this experience, that there will be enough people who want the unique feeling that they get when they come to Bolton Valley. And so far, so good. I think it's right. And I think we have something really special, and people feel it when they come up here. And they love it. So, yeah, I don't know what it's like to run one of the big ones. I know it's challenging to run one of the small ones, but every small business is challenging. It's a part of our charm.
Well, it's nice. I came up from Burlington this morning. Took me a half an hour to get here, maybe a little bit more, because we had some snow over the weekend, thank God. And I could park. I mean, I'm parked 40 feet from your office here,
right.
Which is not what happens at a place like Stowe, where you pay, hundreds of dollars for parking and not necessarily guaranteed a spot, which seems bizarre to me. But
well, I'll say this, neither defending nor not defending them. One of the things I've learned running a business is it can be hard for people to understand the decision-making process that happens when you're running a business. We've tried to combat that. We have this funny little series that we do called Letters from Lindsay on our website, where when we, where sometimes something will rise to the level where I'll try to explain our thinking to people. But, I try to just appreciate that every business has its own challenges, and the people who are running that business are doing their best to address those challenges. And so I try not to comment on other people's decisions.
Let's talk about one of those situations that I was not aware until recently, this situation you have with the skate park. And I just was really impressed with, there are not a lot of people who run a business who just cop to, we didn't handle that well. And you did that immediately.
Well, we didn't, did we?
Well, but you very soon after you'd made a decision to change the skate park, and I mean, everybody's playing pickleball, kind of a natural evolution. And there was pushback on it, and you, it seemed to me, pretty quickly said, we didn't really handle that as well as we could have.
Well, we didn't. We didn't handle it as well as we could have. And for me, the part that I most regretted was not understanding the way that our staff would feel about it. We're small, and like the Vermont legislature, one of the special things is you have access to everyone, and I feel like that's true here, where every employee can come knock on my door, come in, chat, we see each other around. That feeling is really special, and 90% of the time, that means that we don't surprise our employees with big decisions. In this case, I think I didn't understand how big of a decision this would feel like to some people. And so we just announced it. And then learned after the fact that for some people, this was a big decision. And it warranted more conversation in advance, in my mind, especially with the staff, but also with the broader community. Though I will say the failure on my part for good communication with our own staff was the part that really rattled me more than anything. I don't mean to diminish the fact that we should have done more to connect with the community, but yeah, that one was a big miss on both fronts, even right down to the staff.
What have you done since September?
With regard to the courts themselves, or just in terms of...
in trying to deal with what you feel was a mistake you made with the staff? How have you tried to make that right?
Well, around that particular event, we immediately put voluntary, obviously, but a staff meeting together with myself and our COO, Vice President, and we just explained the decision, tried to explain the rationale behind it, apologized, took a lot of feedback. We met one-on-one with several people. So we went through a process there. Then we went through the same kind of process with the community. I tried to be really clear on the front end, and for some people this didn't really resonate, because I said, look, I'm not saying we can't be persuaded that this is the wrong choice, but we actually went through a thought process, and we do believe this is the right choice. I don't want to give you the false impression that we're going to change our mind or that there's going to be a different outcome, but let's talk about it. Let's at least talk about it and give you the opportunity. So we slowed it down. We still did make the transition. So that's how we dealt with that particular issue. But one of the major things that we've done since then is Nathaniel, our Vice President, Chief Operating Officer, and I are now twice a month doing, we call them staff chats, or I don't know, the name's not very catchy, it's kind of bad, but twice a month now, once in the evening and then once in the morning over breakfast. We just post that we'll be there, we'll be up at the tavern, join us for a drink, talk about anything. What are we missing? What are your concerns? Or just chat about skiing, like anything. And it really doesn't, there's no agenda. And then once in the morning over breakfast in the Village Cafe. And so, because I think as much as we think we're available, and as much as I say to you, oh, anybody can come and knock on my door and come in, and as much as that's actually true, not everybody feels that that's true or is comfortable doing that or knows that they can do that. And so now we're just making ourselves available. We put it out in our staff notes and all the staff meetings. And so if anybody wants to talk about something, or if we're missing something, hopefully it can be a chance to miss something. And we're pretty much an open book. I mean, we had somebody come up the other day who was like, okay, well, I've got an issue with this, or our department's been struggling with this. What's your plan long term? What's the 3-year plan to address this issue? And, we'll share it. We're not really secretive up here. We're happy to share our thoughts and our insights pretty openly. So it's just sometimes having the opportunity to have that conversation or have that question asked.
Do you feel that process you did afterward worked?
I think it did. I think it worked as well as it could. It doesn't. Do I think that that no one was disappointed in the end? Well, that's not true. But I think it worked. It did what it needed to do, and we built our relationships with some people around it. Actually, some new relationships.
You mentioned that you worked for How many years did you work at the Main Street Alliance?
Maybe 5.
Okay. What else did you take from the legislature that you've applied here?
That's a great question and a fun one. Well, I would say the main thing that I took from the legislature and from working on campaigns specifically was just the focus on a goal. So when you're running a campaign in the legislature, my favorite was obviously the paid sick days. And you want to pass a bill, and so you have a goal. How you're going to get from point A to Z is just a wild ride of unknowns and variables and constantly changing dynamics. And so you keep your eye on that goal, and you just all the time you're shifting, you're moving around, you're figuring out what do I need to do to get there. And I think in a nutshell, it's the exact same thing here. Our goal is, okay, we want to get to sustainable cash flow. All right, that's the goal. Now, that could look like anything. It could look like anything to get from here to there. How do we do it? And so it's kind of very much the same in this business. Constantly shifting, dynamic environment, navigating through it, sticking to it, never giving up. Never giving up. A lot of challenges up here. So just one foot in front of the other. One foot in front of the other. And it feels like you're moving slow a lot of the time. Oh, man, we still haven't gotten to this thing, or, it still doesn't look sharp. It still looks faded and old, and it's been so many years. But you got to stop, because you're doing stuff all the time, kind of as fast as you can, with everything. But then if you stop and you kind of look back and you recount the amount of things that have happened and changed and evolved and grown, it's incredible when you list it out. On the one hand, it feels like we're going slow and there's still so much before us, and there is. On the other hand, we did a retrospective at a staff meeting recently where we kind of reminisced on how far we've come, and I was doing a PowerPoint, and I started making these like bullets of, all the things we've done, and it was mind-blowing. It was shocking to think of how much we've done and how it's only been 5 or 6 years that or I don't know how long, since we've been back. So there's two sides to it, and you got to be patient. And that's the other thing that I learned working in the legislature is patience. It takes a long time to get to that goalpost.
Let me ask you sort of a big picture question. You mentioned the flooding, you mentioned changing environment. I've wondered to myself why anybody would want to get into the ski business given what's happening with the planet. Is that something you worry about?
Of course, we worry about weather. We live and die by it. We've made a lot of investments in snowmaking. That's one of the areas of greatest investment for us, and that's been very important to us. As our windows for making snow shrink, it's important that we can make it faster, get it out faster. So, there's an element of planning that is preparing to withstand the changing weather patterns. But of course, we're only human and nature is powerful. So we'll see how it plays out. But we think a lot about diversification of revenue up here.
Yep.
And what we can do to sort of have those backstops when we do have inevitably a bad winter, or like last summer, what we would call a bad summer.
Mm-hmm. Yep. What's the challenge been for you as a woman, as a CEO? Have there been any?
Nope, not for me.
Does that surprise you?
No.
Why not?
Well, I've been a woman my whole life. I don't know what it's like to be a man. I think, in my experience, I have not felt that my gender is a barrier to success. This is my experience. I'm grateful for the work that the pioneering women who made that experience possible. You know, the feminists who fought for equality made my life and my experience, my ability to say that possible. But it is true for me. I just find that if you show up, you're good at what you do, you build the trust of people, whether you're a woman or a man. And yes, this is predominantly a man's world, but I've never been made to feel that that's an issue for me here. So,
Do you see this staying in the Delorier family in perpetuity?
that would be very nice.
Is there a next generation? I mean, you're very young still.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see, is there a plan? Is there a next generation? Are there nephews, nieces of yours, your daughter, that have expressed any sort of interest?
Yes, there is a next generation of nephews, nieces, and my daughter, and they do toss it around as they think about it. My daughter has said that, you know, she loves, as much as she sometimes wishes that we lived in Burlington, you know, or somewhere more exciting, closer to everything. She also, in other moods, will say that, you know, she really loves the way that we all live so close together. My parents live at the bottom of the street. In fact, actually, myself and my three brothers, only the fourth, who's out in Jackson, is not included in this. We all live on the same street. One of my brothers, my brother, one older than me, lives literally next door. I look out my living room window at his house. I'll be out on the deck. He'll be out getting home. Oh, hey, Adam. Hey, Elsie. You know, how's it going? Henry, who is my nephew, 1 year ahead of my daughter Juniper, they're extremely close. You know, she's an only child, and Adam's two boys, who they're all about the same age. You know, they're like siblings. And, you know, we've got a little path from the driveways, between the driveways, and they're constantly walking back and forth and in and out of the house. And we're just right over here, and the ski area is so fun, and her friends come up. And so, you know, yeah, in her different moods, she says she hopes that her and Lincoln and Henry, and that they've talked about it, you know, would come back and live on the same street, run Bolton, and raise their kids here. And so we'll see. We'll just see. They're teenagers. We don't know what they're going to want to do, and I'm certainly not going to pressure them into it. But if it works out, if we survive that long, you know,
Yep.
We'll see. There's so many unknowns.
There's so few families that can say that.
Yeah. Oh, our experience here is unique. I feel an incredible gratitude, so much that I hesitate to even talk about it, because it's such a gift that we live in the place we grew up. We work at the place our parents worked and built. We're raising our children here. It's so integrated into the community. We are so fortunate. So fortunate. We, in this modern day, to have a family enterprise, you know, grounded in a place, in earth. You know, when I walk on the trails and I look at the view and I breathe it in and I think these are the trees that were here when I was a kid, it's like an incredible gift. Really is. You really feel like a caretaker. It shifts your perspective.
I think that's a good place to end, don't you?
I'm happy.
That wraps it up for this edition of 802 News. Thanks for listening.